right, Alexandra, you have the first and most of the agenda items. So yeah.
Yeah, so bear with me. Okay, so first off, first, thank you everyone who looked at it, and especially George for commenting on it. It's always nice to have a lot more eyes on the code, so you're not going on by yourself and just confirming that you're looking at the right things. So yeah, this is going to be technical, but I guess we can take any other questions afterwards. So yeah. So yeah, about the GitHub, the JIRA importer. The idea was to reuse the most of the code that we have currently. So I've looked a bit, and it seemed that GitHub Importer is something that we can base this JIRA importer on. It does a lot of stuff asynchronously in Psychic work job. So when I first started this agenda, I didn't know anything about it. So I did post a lot of the questions that did get a lot of responses and now seem like very kind of obvious. So yeah, the first thing was I was not sure how it was really running and where was the parallelism starting on, because what GitHub imported us is it runs a lot of very small workers in parallel, and that depends a lot on the resources that the specific server or cluster has. Because yeah, it depends on how many threads are allocated to these Psychic workers. So yeah, there once this, I think what it does is, well, what it does is actually start like one single worker, a worker per single issue that it imports, and then after all of the issues are imported, what GitHub API offers, you can pull all of the nodes from the specific repository, so it can start a lot of the same process on every single node. So yeah, it just pulls all the nodes and then links them to the specific issues through a caching mechanisms. I think we can do something similar with JIRA, but it's not totally the same, because JIRA in JIRA API, you cannot pull just commands. You'll still have to pull issues, and then for each of these issues, you'll have to connect the specific commands. But one thing about JIRA is that you can specify which fields you want to pull from for these specific issues. There is some basic fields that are pulled like anytime you query the issue API, but then commands can be loaded or not loaded separately. So we can similarly to the GitHub importer, import all of the issues like flatly, just import every issue with their descriptions and some of the metadata, and then have another stage, so to say, where we will import nodes, and then another stage where we will import attachments, for instance, and some other stuff that is strictly related to the issues. But we will have to kind of fetch from the same issues API. So we'll get the issues first, and then we'll go and iterate through the commands. And one other question that I have on the GitHub implementation is why is it not using, especially on nodes, why is it not using batch inserting, but it rather starts again a single Psychic worker on every single node that it inserts. So it kind of inserts. It does a lot of to me, we can. It feels like we can optimize the inserting in the database a bit there. So yeah, if anyone has any insights there, will be great.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what was the decision making when this was introduced, because this this whole importer was implemented by not the import team as it is right now. I think I do agree that one sidekick job per relation might be a bit of an overkill, but it does use bulk insert.
I can understand it for issues, because you want to make that mapping, although you can still get the IDs from the bulk insert and try and map those to the JIRA issue, for instance. So then you have them in the cache, and because like Sidekick cannot guarantee that it will not enqueue the same job twice, you want to have that in cache so you don't re-import the same issue 2 times or something like that. So you want to have that mapping sort of, and then I guess that will be another aspect important when you want to trigger the import on the same project for the second time, for instance, to kind of import again some of the newer issues and so on. So it's great to have that caching and that mapping. So I guess for the issues it makes sense. I think for the nodes we can kind of improve that. So sorry for interfering there.
No, it's all good. I guess we need to discuss about how. I took a look at the POC. Is that going to be is this the solution that we're going for, or is that the proof of concept?
Well, the POC is single-threaded there, but I think the idea of having this parallel stuff where you can, like, I think I did change over to the POC where for the commands I do batches of 100 issues, and then for each of these issues I will start a batch importer for the commands themselves, and then commands themselves I will import in batches like of 100 commands or something like that. So it does bulk insert with a lot of like more commands. There are some issues with the JIRA Ruby gem at the moment that it does not allow to pull commands in pages. Like you just pull all of the commands from the issue at once. So we'll have to work on that side as well to improve the gem itself. But yeah, the idea is like to batch it in some way and to just do the bulk inserts, at least on the nodes. I think that's the way to go to not hit the database too much.
Okay. And so as far as I understood, there are issues that we want to import, and there are comments as well, right? That we need to additionally.
Well, not for MVC, but yeah, we will have to import commands and everything.
I'm just thinking this advanced stage worker that we were discussing. So if there's more than one relation that can be migrated apart from the top level issues, then yes, we can reuse a lot of GitHub importer code, because if we just don't reuse any of GitHub importer code, we can still do this in batches with job waiters. There's a lot of functionality that exists already that can be reused, like job waiters, for example. And we don't need to touch GitHub importer at all. But it would be nice to
yeah, I mean, there is some
staging.
There is some functionality that can be reused from the GitHub, I think. It's not like massive or anything. There is still a bulk of work that needs to be done specific to the JIRA importer, but like the advanced stage, I think, is the one thing that we can reuse because we can, and like it will be. I think it will be good to do it in stages, even though nodes are strictly related to the issue, and you'll have to pull the issues once again to do this. I think that gives the opportunity for the user that does the import to actually see all of the issues imported even before the commands arrive on each of the issues. So it's kind of a side effect, but I think it's kind of neat. Maybe we will not want to do. I'm not sure. Like that's a higher up decision, I guess. If we just don't want to reveal the issues before they are completely imported and stuff like that. I don't know.
I think
technically, I think it's a good reason to do so.
I think the importer, like the GitHub importer, works in a similar fashion, where you can see partially imported data, I believe. Like some of the things can be viewable before they are complete. But
Yeah, it will be similar. Even if we do, like, we can do it flat, in a flat manner, to import issues and then import comments on the issues and then import attachments, or we can do it deep, like for each issue, import everything and then move to another issue, or maybe we can have several issues that do import everything first and then move to another batch of issues that import everything top down. Yeah, so there are two different approaches that we can take. I think just because we have experience with GitHub Importer and I mean the code itself and people that work on that, we can reuse that idea. So yeah, the other thing to move on with the GitHub Importer and how it handles things that we'll have to address here is, I think, is I did not see where it does report on the failed imports. Like if an issue did not import, how does the user receive that kind of feedback? So yeah, that's another thing that needs to be worked on, or at least I didn't see it in the GitHub Importer. Maybe just in GitHub Importers, jobs don't fail and issues can get always imported and so on. So maybe we'll have the same effect on GitHub Importer and we will not have to bother with it.
Do we have any tracking or metrics or any numbers of failure rates or errors or anything like that?
I don't have.
Yes, there are metrics
I don't
for
think
every stage. For every stage.
Well, there are metrics of how many issues were imported, but no metrics on how many issues failed to be imported or something, or notes or anything like that. So like from my understanding, all it does is it retries the job several times, let's say 5, or you can configure it, but it does 5 times. And if it doesn't, like it doesn't succeed after that, it just gets killed. It doesn't even get into the dead pool jobs in the psychic, I think.
Because this is something we were talking about in the import discussion, is that there needs to be some sort of method of tracking of this data because it's part of the report that we want to generate after the fact, right? So X number of things were imported, X number of things failed, why they failed. So some sort of way of documenting that or tracking that could be part of this project at some point in time.
Right, maybe it's not part of MVC, but I think it's good to at least give feedback to the user, to the importer. Well, everything succeeded 100%, or we have this number of issues that for some reason did not get imported.
That's definitely something we're not doing a great job at right now with other importers, and that we want to change. So this is an area for improvement for us, for all of the importers. And we probably don't want to start by making the same mistakes or architecting this in a way that doesn't allow us to do this. So we definitely want to be able to understand which things imported, which didn't, where the failures are, and then be able to either retry those failures or report back to the user which things have failed, so they can manually do something about it, at least know which items haven't imported. So this is definitely something we need to have the ability to do. And that's why I asked the question, if we start batching, we need to be able to still understand and handle individual failures, however we decide to batch. So efficiency is important. I don't particularly, in my mind, personally, I don't care if we import all issues and then add all the comments, if they show up like that or they show up vertically, or that is not, I don't know where the value is and which one is more valuable to the user. I would say that we here optimize for the speed of import and also be for the ability to understand and handle failures. And then however that shows up, if that means that shows up all at once or in waves, we'll take that. It's my take on it.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree. Again, I don't think that is going to be part of the MVC. There's already quite a bit of, I don't know, I don't talk about the scope, but yeah, that's something to be tracked and followed up on. So yeah, there is quite a bit of notes on the fact that these failures happen, so we need to take care of those. So what else do we have here? Right. Yeah, then there is the, I think with the notes, yeah, so we have this on the button where George is mentioning using the import state from like technical and architectural, I think decision, is that the right thing? I think that's the right thing, because that's what all of our importers do use, the state and the import data. And I think we can reuse that.
Yeah.
That is an object that is being used like for the entire, like a lot of our imports right now do import repository and issues, or only repository. I don't think we have an importer that does only issues right now.
Yes.
So I'm not exactly sure how that will work if, for instance, someone wants to import issues from JIRA and then wants to import repository or something else from GitHub or some other provider. So I'm not exactly sure how that will work with this with the import state.
My main concern was exactly that. The import state of the project is the responsibility of it was to import the project as a whole, right? Not partial import of just issues or whatever else we introduce along the along the way. Let's say we introduce milestone migration from JIRA, we introduce epics migration. If we reuse the same import state, I think there might be also some side effects in terms of if you update import state to in progress right now, will the project work, or will the project show an import in progress state? So it's going to basically like block the use of the project until the import is complete. So I'm okay with reusing it. My two concerns were, number one is that, you know, technically it's for the project as a whole, that has some that has some side effects, like the changes in UI when you see import in progress. And the other thing was updates to like project models and different other parts of the code, just to cater for this importer. Just doesn't sound right, where all we do is we want to create some issues in the project. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Can you be more specific on like updates on the models? What do you mean there? Because like pretty much what we update there is set the import type, which seems to be the case for all of other imports. Like, obviously, we didn't have yet. I don't think we're having yet an import that does imports from two different providers. So that's an aspect that was not tackled yet. So that's probably something that will require, I don't know, some kind of, we're not doing that right now. We're not talking about importing issues from JIRA and from some other place. We're talking about like importing a JIRA project into a GitLab project. That's my understanding. So I think this is fine to be used. But if we have other visions that it's going to be like importing issues from JIRA and repository and issues from some other place, then yeah, we would definitely need to revisit that.
Well, more specifically is updating the project models. I see there are some mentions of JIRA imports. That was the first thing that I noticed. Then we just need to double check the unintended side effects of updating, like messing with the import state when the project is imported already. You know, I'm not sure if there's any side effects in the UI. Like I said, with the importer state blocking the use of the project. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think we can. Yeah, I think right now, if you set it in like it started or scheduled or something like that, on the repository page, you will see a scrolling thing. I think. Again, yeah. I think that can be tackled just to see if it's we can group the importers and say these are issues only importers, so no need to block the repository and so on. Yeah, so like right now, I don't see the need to create another kind of object or to store the state in a different place, but maybe the more we dive into it, it will reveal. But yeah, it's a fair point. So.
I think for MVC, we can use what we have, and this importer will grow to import more and more things about the project. So we will look at epics, we will look at milestones, we will look at many other objects down the line. So it may actually make sense to turn the state of the project to being imported, wait a little, because your structure of the project may end up changing by the time the import is done. So I don't see this as a bad thing. And if this is something that's available, then for MVC, it sounds like the right thing to do and not invent something new.
Yeah, so with that, moving, like, there are two pieces of data on the import happening, the import state, which is mainly, I see it as a reporting the progress on the import, because it goes into scheduled, and then it goes into started, and then it goes into, I think it's finished or something like that. It has a couple phases, a couple statuses. And then there is import data, where you store some of the metadata of the import itself. I think it stores some credentials, or for instance, for the JIRA import, you can store the project key that you are importing from. And I think this data can be then used also, for instance, for storing the, I don't know, the last JIRA issue that was imported, so that when next time the import is started, you can know from which point on to move. And this is a bigger question for the data idempotency, where, like, it's quite complicated. I'm for sure we're not going to tackle it in the MVC, but there are a lot of aspects there where you imported a bunch of issues, and then to these issues, the description was edited or comments were edited. What do you do when you re-import? Do you update this? How do you update it? How do you track which ones were actually changed, which ones did not change, and so on? So for the MVC, we can actually, I think it's not too complicated to do. You imported everything from JIRA up to issue like X, and then on the next import, you can import from this issue downwards any new issue that was added. But I don't think we can tackle in this version the updates that happen on previously imported issues.
So that's the order of ID.
We are sorting them by the created date, and then we can store either the created date or the ID, or we just know that some state that we imported up to, and then move on from there.
Okay.
So yeah, well, we don't have that yet, but I think, I mean, we can do that, I guess, in the MVC, or quickly following up with the iteration on that. So that seems like an addressable thing to do. As for updating the edits that happened, I think that's a bigger problem that does require a lot more thinking and architecturing.
But that also goes into whether this is going to be a sync or an import.
Right.
Import is a one-time thing, and there is no going back and re-dipping into that pool. Like
right. So that really matters on what the requirements are and what we want to do with this. Yeah, we can, like, everything can be done, but I'm not sure we want to replicate everything JIRA does into GitLab, like pooling and then having versions and then having another version and so on and so forth.
No.
I can confirm that is not what we want to do.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a different feature for that too.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, for the I think for the technical stuff, I'm cleared up mainly. There is one other aspect that I didn't really touch on, is how we're going to migrate JIRA flavored Markdown into GitLab flavored Markdown, and that's another totally, like, bigger aspect of this import. Yeah, there can be links to other issues or some sort of images and attachments and so on. So yeah, but again, not for the MVC.
Alexander, did you identify whether we have something existing in the database that we can store the original ID of the JIRA issue that the GitLab issue is
No,
created
so
from?
for the GitHub, we do reuse the IID. So they would parse the, I think in GitHub they have number or something they're storing. So they're just attaching that number to the IID and kind of having a reference back and forth. Yeah, for the, no, we don't have a field, and I'm not sure that, like, we can add it, but then it depends what we want to do with it. Like if we just, for the like, for the ability to import stuff and not duplicate stuff, I think we can get away with storing just the last ID that we imported and then move from there further on. Yeah, if we want to do some sort of other tracking, then we might want to store the external ID as well.
I think, yeah, the external ID is going to be more and more important. So if it's something that you can find used, for the MVC, so for the MVC, you can use that, fine. But I think eventually we'll add up storing the external ID for a couple of different reasons. One is for any one of those failures that are not just like, you import this much and then you stop. Let's say you have failures throughout, you can go back and figure out where those failures are and then just work on importing those things. And the other one is we may want to provide actually links back from our issue. So maybe in the comment, we may want to put a link back to the JIRA, original JIRA issue. So having those IDs or links that are external unique IDs are going to be useful for some of the features we're thinking about. So if this is something that you find useful now for MVC, please feel free to add the external ID piece of data in there, and then we'll actually have use for it.
Like, for the linking back, we like the JIRA service already provides that. If you would put in, if you connected the JIRA service to the given project or given instance, and then you put the issue key, it will identify the project and will link back. And we already have that even in the POC. As for the import for tracking the failures, I'm not sure we want to add that field to the issues table itself, but rather have a separate table to just storing that. So this is where the technical aspect of it comes. Do we want to add another field to the issues table and mainly have it as like empty or null, and then for some of the imports we'll have some values there? Or if you want it only to track the status of the import, then we probably don't want to do that. We probably want it to just have it some other object, some other table, track it there, and then just get rid of that, and so on. So
I wonder how we actually handle this in the JIRA sync, because I would imagine that for the JIRA sync functionality, which then constantly syncs back and forth, we must have solved this somehow to have that kind of reference to the other system, and probably not just by URL. I don't know. So maybe worth investigating.
yeah, I'll look at that. I didn't know about the sync service actually. So yeah, I'll look into that.
But if it's not there, I could definitely see how it's useful for us to have the external reference.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much what I had. Yeah, if there are any questions, concerns, things to be raised, speak up. Oh, there was one outside of the MVC or anything, is like, so we would import issues. Would we want some, let's say we have a customer that would want to only import a part, like a portion of the issues that they have in JIRA into GitLab. Like the simplest thing that I'm thinking is like, I want to only import the open issues. I don't need everything imported into GitLab. Let's just start fresh, import only the open issues, and we'll just continue to work on GitLab. So then we'll have to have the option of selecting the status that you want your issues to be imported on. And then there is another request where you want the ones that are resolved to some kind of resolve ID, and so on and so forth. Is that something that we plan on adding and doing, or is that like maybe they can just pull the GQL from the JIRA issue, put it into a field that we provide, and then we'll query the issues that they want to import into GitLab.
So I think I would say not for the MVC, but I think, yes, exactly. We need some way to allow the user to kind of customize the issues that would get imported. I'm going to talk with Gabe. We can make a decision on this. I think the one that makes the most sense to me and would seem the easiest is just accept the query string. Like just let them create the query in JIRA and copy and paste it into RN, and we can use that to structure the import. Like, I mean, that seems like the best way to manage it, because then we don't have to build it. We just use what's already there. That's where my head's at now. I think could be right, could be wrong. Not sure yet, but
yeah. Do we know if the users are going to be sophisticated enough? Like, is this sometimes like an admin type user who may not understand the queries as well? So,
well, the only people that can import are admins or owners in GitLab. So I would assume that people who have that permission have some knowledge. And I would also say that, yes, there's already an endpoint in JIRA for searching for issues based on a JQL query. So like, it's not, that would be the path of least resistance for us to do. And I think, like as a next step to allow better scoping of issues, even if that is more technical, it's the easiest place to start. And I would start there. I also think it's important, we were talking about yesterday in Slack, that like more or less like linking one project in JIRA to one project in GitLab. But I don't think that that's like that restriction is beneficial in the long run, especially if you look at the JQL query, which spans multiple projects. Because the way the issues are organized in the endpoints, it's not automatically scoped to project. It's just like you have an issues endpoint and you can get all issues basically. And I think you can scope it to, you could insert a parameter to get a project, but you can also, with the JQL query, look across all projects. And so I think there is a valid use case where people will want to pull like multiple projects or issues from different projects into one GitLab project, and we shouldn't force them to not be able to do that. If that makes sense.
I agree with that.
Not for MVC, but
yeah, not for MVC, but that does add quite a bit of complexity on our side, like on the GitLab side. And especially when they would want to rerun the import, so to say. So imagine they would specify some sort of GQL, import it into one GitLab project, then go back to the importer, specify a different GQL, and import again to GitLab. And that second GQL would include some of the issues that were already imported, some of the issues that are new, and so on and so forth. So you need to kind of be able to digest and know and not duplicate, or just duplicate and let them figure it out.
Yeah, I think this gets back to the underlying problem though of like the original scope for the MVC was make it more or less like once the import is done, you don't maintain state about anything. Like they're responsible for basically not duplicating things, and we're not maintaining like partial imports of some objects later on and based on what's new. Like that's super complex, and that's something that maybe if we get to that point and that's required. But right now I'm just like of the mindset, like if you're importing issues into a project and then you realize, oh, I need to rerun the import because I didn't get everything. Like what I did when I was running the POC on the review app is like, I just went in and deleted all the issues that I had just imported and then I just imported it again. Because like the data is not lost if you delete it soon within GitLab, because it's all still in JIRA. So you can delete all the issues that you just imported and then you can, re-import. So
that raises the question here now, should we like right away, right from the gate, once you imported something, you just cannot do the import again?
You can do the import again. It's like you just,
I mean, if you already have, let's put it the other way. If you already have issues, you should not be able to see the import project again. You first have to clean up everything and then just go back and import stuff.
I think you just show it and let, like, for at least what the simplest thing to do is not worry about all that right away. You always show the thing, you let them pick which project they want to import from, and you import right now all the issues from that particular project. And then the next step would be give them the ability to scope it by JQL query so that they can pick which states and those sorts of things like that. And then the next thing after that is if we get to that point of having to maintain I guess, like partial imports. I'm of the mindset, like I would rather just build something that listens to, like you set up a webhook listener so that anytime anything on the subscribed issue changes, you just update the data in GitLab without having to manually import it. Like that seems like a better architecture pattern longer term anyways. But I mean,
could we like include in, not MVC, but like a quick follow-up, like, you know, add this label to all issues I inputted in JIRA, or I imported from JIRA, like give the user some way to flag it inside of like using a GitLab construct that would allow them to manage it a little better.
What would be the
Label
purpose?
it.
Sorry.
Label on GitHub, GitLab, or
Yeah. So like when I'm
Jira.
when I'm setting up the import process, let's say I want to pull from this project, or here's my jQuery or whatever, and I like an optional like add this label to these issues, to any issue that gets imported, because then that would allow the user to kind of self-maintain tracking, and even see, you know, they could create a different label every time. Like maybe that was import 1, import 2. Like I'm trying to think of ways we could put power into the user's hands to cover the different use cases that we would have a hard time building for.
because then if there's a label there, Holly, they can filter by that label on the issue list and then bulk edit, bulk delete, you know?
Yeah, that's what I figured. I just wanted to ask the question.
Yeah, I think it's just like a cheap tracking option.
That's a great, powerful feature there. I mean, cheap, but gives you a lot of power.
Right. Yeah.
What would be the benefit in allowing them to import again and again without first removing the issues? Because it does sound like in that case we would potentially have import a project, the project has issues, and then you import it again, and now you have issue 1, project 1, issue 1, import 2. Would that be correct? You would have essentially multiple copies?
The goal would be like, think about slowly transitioning. Let's say you don't want to bring all your, this is like not the MVC, but when we get to allowing people to scope by JQL query, let's say somebody just wants to give GitLab a dry run and they have a sprint and JIRA, and they want to bring just that sprint's issues over, right? And those, so they write a JQL query, they scope it to just the sprint's issues, they copy that over. Let's say that, you know, their PM is working on issues for the next one, and then they want to bring that next sprint over, right? Like, and so they'll like scoping the issues to just that, and then importing those issues. You're going to have there's a couple different scenarios where you're going to bulk import like an entire project over, but then you're going to have the scenario where I just want a small subset of my issues, because maybe I don't even care about all the other issues over there right now, or maybe we just don't know. But that's where like I would not artificially limit the user by saying, once you import, you can't import again from the project, because then we would have to add state tracking for, okay, have you deleted all the issues from the other project? Or we'd have to add state tracking for, okay, which issues have you imported and haven't you? And let's just grab the ones that you haven't yet. Like there's all sorts of conditional logic that's going to get super messy if we like at this point in time try to make those like engineering decisions, I feel like.
But does that mean that we would potentially have 2 kind of versions of an issue?
Sure.
Okay. I'm just trying to decide if, from UI perspective, if we need to warn them of that or denote the differences somehow. Like we have open and closed when we, you know, close an issue, or when we turn an issue into an epic, it closes it, but it creates that copy, and that alone causes confusion. And so I want to understand if there's a way that we need to let them know that they're not looking at the most recent version if they happen to pull up the issue via a search or something like that.
Maybe, but that's also like where we have to balance not over engineering, you know, like to meet what their goals are. And I think the only way that we do that is by shipping in small pieces and like then iterating. So the way that I look at it is like, get the basic MVC working where you pull all the issues. Next up, get the JQL query working where it's pulling all the things scoped to the JQL query. Don't worry about maintaining any sort of like, here are the things. Once the import is done, like we shouldn't care about what happens in the future.
And I think to cover that, we can document that, like actually have that in documentation and link out to it. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, Holly, and what you're asking, but kind of in what Gabe's saying too is like, we're in no position to be able to engineer against all those scenarios. And in fact, those scenarios are what make this such a complicated, large project. And so we have to walk into it, and there are shortcomings to doing it this way, mainly just it's going to be awkward. And so I think we can do our best to not over-engineer it, but I think documentation and linking to that documentation from the experience is probably a good first step. And we'll go from there.
Yeah, we don't want to be too smart. Like sometimes when you try to be too smart, you mess up things. And
yeah, I keep going
people
back.
Don't have brains. I mean, they can figure this out. They know what they're doing.
I keep going back to this one piece of feedback. Yeah, I don't know. It might have been about custom workflows or something. The need for that. It was, the comment was really just like, stop treating us users like we're stupid. Like,
I was on the custom fields issue. Yeah.
Was it the custom field one? Well, and that one just like sticks with me. It's like, because I know what we're coming from it, from the way we want to put guardrails so you don't mess things up. But at the same time, like if you're doing this, if you're interacting with these products, like you generally know what you're doing, and we need to respect that and just try to. I'd rather give information and learn when somebody does get confused and use that to optimize. Yeah.
I think I want to kind of push back a bit about all of this because it feels like what we're doing is just a shotgun blast, saying, hey, here's everything, but there's no organizational structure. And so you're not having any sort of, I imported this at this date and time on this project. It's like, well, there is no project data that's coming over. There's no labeling. There's no anything that's coming over except the pieces that we've described. And so having this issue of you're having, for example, re-importing can cause confusion. Importing in stages will cause confusion. None of this sounds like any good user experience to me. It just literally sounds like, here's a shotgun blast of data, figure it out. And we expect you to figure it out because you're an engineer and you know what you're talking about. I would strongly disagree with that logic.
I share that concern.
I agree. I think we should show the warning, but I'm talking about in like small incremental steps. So like, let's go to the next step after we get the JQL in, right? The next step after you let people scope by.
What I'm saying is that, okay, that's fine and wonderful, but let's leave that as an engineering level and not leave that as a user-facing project or task. Like we have this thing under the hood, it's working behind the scenes for private use and tests, kind of like a beta version, but it's not ready for prime time. It's not ready for user consumption apart from like specific user test cases. Like we handpicked users to test this. I wouldn't roll this out publicly until like we can have quantitative usage of it. So like I'm importing a project or half a project in segments, and I know I did it on this date with this inventory, with this architecture, these labels, and then I can do it in the future and merge them, or have it a more robust project instead of just here's some data, figure it out.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, and that's the ultimate goal. So like when we get to the point where people are like allowing them to configure their own mapping of fields from JIRA to GitLab, right? So they can say, well, this custom field in here, I want to make this a scope label in GitLab, and this label over here, I want to do this other thing. And then also what is on the steps, like the next iterations, is having a import report, right? So maybe we stash that and save that with the project itself. So when you go to the JIRA importer, you can click on a tab to view my past imports along with all the data that came over with them. Like there's all sorts of ways. I completely agree that I want to iterate to get there, but like that, if we wait until it's at that point to start getting it in the hands of customers, that's 3 months out. And like,
no, I mean, we can use it in the hands of customers, as an MVC or an MMVC. Just be cognizant of who we're letting use that feature and how they're using it. So as part of the user research that we would do, we would say only this client who's had this huge need for this project will get this feature in the MMVC iteration, and we'll use them as a research and test bed to further out the more big issues that we're discussing today, so that when we do feel more comfortable with stronger research and stronger features in the project, in the MVC, we can actually roll it out publicly saying, okay, now it's totally ready for prime time. And we've had this test case with these handpicked users where we have that, next month, next milestone, whatever, right?
Yeah, I just think to getting it to that point, it's 3 months, and that's not going to be acceptable. So like in a perfect world, yes, I would like to do that.
Yep.
But it's also like,
so yeah,
what we've been asked to do is basically a shotgun blast. So
we've got a mandate to get an MVC out of this by 12/10. We took the reduced scope and communicated the risks involved, and it's getting reported on to the executive level in their efficiency meeting they're having. And at this point, it seems Sid is comfortable with us moving forward with an MVC that is uncomfortable. That sentence makes sense. And so that's where this is at. So yeah, I agree. There are things I would rather have in the MVC before we rolled it out, but you know, the impetus is to get it out and get people using it so that we can iterate and build the right thing faster.
Along those lines, Holly, what can we do to do some of that qualitative research at the same time? So like, I would like to do that in parallel, and I would like to like roll that in as we're shipping these small things, those improvements. Like, I don't want to just say like, put the blinders on and march forward.
Yeah.
So I would like to figure out what we can do to like be intentional about doing this in a timely manner. One of the problems that we have with this is like nobody in GitLab uses JIRA. So we lost like a big dog fooding audience to give us internal feedback. And then externally, we would have to then go and try to find specifically those people who are ready to import issues into JIRA. So that pool like is super small right now, which I can reach out to. We can reach out to the TAMs, to some of the SDRs and see like who is considering moving to JIRA. There's also a couple people on the Epic and the issue that we're talking about wanting to move their issues over. So maybe we can get them into like a test group and like run with that.
So don't we have, so I know one of the things we're tracking is like the number of instances that have the JIRA like integration spun up, right? I think I saw that in Periscope the other day.
Yeah, it's there. It's in the usage ping.
Yeah, I was like, is there an opportunity to leverage that like in-app messaging tool that the growth team has rolled out to actually like maybe pop up something and be like, hey, would you like to try to import some issues? I don't know. I'm just trying to think how we could expand our reach.
I think we need to define first who it is that we want to actually do the testing with. So I spoke with Catherine again yesterday, and I have started working on a research issue that I'm going to wrap up actually after this call. And Daniel and I and Catherine will start collaborating on that to start this research process. But I think we need to understand if we're looking for people who are actively looking to move from JIRA to GitLab, or if it's customers who are kind of trying to do that process right now another way. We need to define all of that. I also reached out to Ben Prescott the other day and got access to Zendesk and started looking through tickets. And there were several requests in there from customers for this very issue. So it would be great if we can maybe get in touch with those people and take advantage of that and kind of pull some resources from there. But my first thought is that we could start with a survey just to kind of cast a wide net and see who all might be a qualifier for this type of research. And then from there, start working on some quick wireframes or a prototype, or just even high-level interviews, if nothing else, because there's a series of questions that I know we want to answer before we get too deep, just to help us kind of get down the right path. But that would be something, Gabe, that you and I could work on alongside Daniel and Catherine and anybody else that's interested in being involved.
Yes, please.
How close are we, or how much do we have a CSV reader from JIRA? So JIRA has the export all documents from CSV. How much of that do we extrapolate or interpret or plug into GitLab?
Well, when they import a CSV?
Yeah, so like if I'm a JIRA user and I want to migrate to GitLab, I export all of my JIRA junk into a CSV file. I come over to GitLab and I import the CSV. Does all of that come over only the 3 things we've discussed, or is a lot of stuff just thrown out the window? Is it like, how much of that can we interpret or pull into our system?
I think the CSV actually, like the import CSV right now, works as you can export as CSV from GitLab and then import as CSV into GitLab. It doesn't have anything to do with JIRA.
I have heard of cases where people use that format and just export out of JIRA, massage it into the CSV format and import. So this is a cheap way, or like the only way right now for people to move issues from JIRA into GitLab. However, it only does title and description. And I think description might be broken right now. We have a bug. So that's the state of it right now. So I don't know if we can extract usage from it or deduce something from it, but that's there.
While we were on the topic there just before of labeling and all that kind of stuff when we import stuff, maybe George and Alexandria, maybe you'd know, the way we accomplished that on Service Desk was to allow users to upload templates and then allow them to select a template and use that when when somebody emails Service Desk. It seems like we could do something very similar, and it's relatively low cost, and it would give the user the ability to basically set any labels, any milestones, any quick action can be executed on every issue that's imported, and also you can add to the description. That seems like it would give the user like the maximum amount of flexibility when using the importer with relatively little cost.
Yeah, I think that's something that would be a really huge benefit. You know, through the importing process, you would say, okay, now I've finished my import. Do you want to add a label or some sort of taxonomy to this job that you have completed? And then that ties it into our labeling system. So then when they leave the process, once they've finished, now their import has an attached label as part of this workflow. So they're not really importing anything. They just have to add something manually.
It wouldn't even, but even that would be quite a lot harder to build in this case. As the importer creates issues, it would use a template that the user has defined themselves and pushed up to the project. And that template could have quick actions, add these 3 labels, assign to this milestone, apply a weight. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you just have this maximum flexibility that you can use any quick action.
Yeah,
in fact, you can edit the description as well.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily certain where we would plug in that feature in the flow, but that's something that I was looking for, and I think that meets that need. If we put it into the template process and offer them like a default or something, that would make a lot of sense.
I mean, sounds possible, but I'm not too sure about MVC scope. But that's something Alexander can do.
I'm not. I don't know how templates work, but like if we are already doing that, that should not be an issue. There are some things to be answered that, like, even if we only allow them to label things, do we want to have a default label on every import? Even if they don't select anything, do we want to kind of hard impose a label on any import? So that they can later remove them, but at least like even if they forgot to do so, we'll have it labeled by some date or something, anything. And similarly with the template, if they didn't create one, should we have one set up in GitLab by default and so on?
That may be the MVC, is that we just impose a label called imported, and that'd be the MMVC. Like, this is how we do, and then we let them later pick different labels or remove them or do whatever. But that sounds like a great way of not leaving the user stranded, given that we're not giving them what got imported, what didn't get imported, which things, and we also let them re-import things. So given all the pitfalls that we're leaving in the MMVC, this would be the one thing that if I could just add to MMVC, and it feels like it should be able to add it quickly with quick actions. So I don't know, I know Keenan just dropped off, and
I have to drop off too.
So do you feel like we're asking for too much to be added to MMVC, or is this like, if there was like one thing to do with
I think just labeling it can work. I'll have to look into that, and even like labeling maybe with the current date or something like JIRA import date, and then on the next import you'll have JIRA import the other date or date time or whatever, so that you can then later on just filter out, and then we can work on that and have better labeling or better templating.
I'm all for it. I just know that Keenan also wants to keep the lid on the scope. So if this really increases the effort by
I'll look into that. I'll have an estimate. I cannot say from top of my head right now it will be X amount of work, but I can look into that and then get back to everyone and we'll see if that's doable.
Adding a simple label is fine. We do need to keep scope small, because what we're not talking about is the complexity of like parsing a JIRA description and converting it into a GitLab description. And like the most important thing is moving comments over, which is like a whole other like can of worms. And so I don't know. This is why we sort of like need to get something out there and then start getting feedback from customers about what is important for them to bring over. Because I have a sort of a good idea based on the information I have, but it's incomplete. And so like doing things iteratively while keeping these things in mind is what we need to do. And like touching base on a regular cadence to talk about, okay, well, we released this thing and we learned this much. What problem should we solve next? Because there's literally like 30 problems that we could focus on, but we really need to force rank them and like put the engineering effort behind solving the ones that are most important for the customers.
And that's also something that I hope to understand as part of the research is what is the next most important thing to focus on.
Yep. Let's do it. I'll follow up with you, Holly, about the research. I got to drop.
Yeah, but I think we're pretty much at time if anyone has anything else.
Just a quick question.
Yep.
So who's going to be the owner of this feature long term? Is it going to be the import team? Or is it going
the
to be
maintainer, sort of, when it's all said and done? Yeah.
Okay.
My understanding from and now of course Gabe and Keenan both dropped off, but my understanding is that long term this goes back to, but I'm just going to say it here because it's getting recorded. Long term this feature comes back to the import team for maintenance and feature growth, like development, right? I don't know what long term means, whether that's 3 milestones or 12, but
Or one.
or one. Same point.
Okay. Cool. Thanks everyone for feedback. It was really, really informative and great for me at least. So yeah.
Great meeting you.
I know. Yeah. Nice meeting you all.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah. Have a nice day.
See ya.